Greetings to you. My name is Tara Brabazon and I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University. And welcome to Vlog 229, How to Write a Book Chapter. This request comes from Chemi. Hi Chemi. There'll be a lot of remarkable things that I'll remember from 2020, but one of them is having the opportunity to meet you. You're wonderful, and it's my pleasure to deliver this small token to thank you for your friendship and your kindness and your advice and your insight. And Chemi, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explore the nature of the book chapter for you, because in your request of me, you said it's getting a bit difficult for you to activate that component of your CV. You're just unable to get traction on it. So therefore today we're going to talk about the book chapter. We're going to talk about the what, the how and the why of it, and provide a way to give you a little bit of momentum and a little bit of movement and a little bit of confidence to go for it and get those book chapters. And today we have a very, very simple structure. Why would you write a book chapter? We always need to start with the why. Why is it a thing? Why should we care? How do you find that opportunity to write the book chapter, which was very important to Chemi, but also what to write in a book chapter. This is a great one, so I'm thrilled and I love doing the research on this one, and it's an area that I've been incredibly interested in for about 25 years, and during those 25 years the book chapter has changed. So let's get into it. Why would you, yes you, why would you write a book chapter? Now in the old days, and as you know in our accelerated modernity, the old days is about 5 years ago, book chapters were seen to be a problem or a non-starter, right? So, oh yeah, no, you don't really want to be writing a book chapter. And let me tell you why very senior, very wise people would be offering you that advice. Because what would happen is a book chapter, your effort, your time, your research would be buried under an edited title of a book and indeed the editor's name. Okay, so this meant that really amazing research would miss citations, wouldn't gain an audience, and it was a bit truncated in terms of dissemination. Now, that wasn't an urban myth, that was absolutely true. And I have an example of this. I have a lot of examples of different things, but this just to give you a personal example of how book chapters were buried. Okay, I wrote what was really a pretty great chapter on Christmas media. How interesting is that? Christmas media. And I wrote that chapter, about a decade ago, so when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Now, that was in the late, great Professor Sheila Whiteley's book. Thinking of you, Sheila. She came up with this great edited collection on Christmas and popular culture. How fantastic was that? So, great idea. Sheila, legendary scholar, fantastic human. And I wrote really a quite innovative post-disciplinary chapter on Christmas and the media. Great. All going well. Now that pretty great chapter is about to stagger to 10 citations in a decade. Okay, so that's the archetype of what I'm talking about. It's like, book chapter's great. If they're not read, they're not cited. Okay, so really 5-10 years ago, the argument I'm presenting here was absolutely accurate and correct. So when you hear people say that argument, they were right. But you notice I've put that in the past tense now. They were right. They're no longer right. Because publishing, academic publishing in particular, has changed, and academic publishers have changed. So what's happening now is book publishers are what I call cannibalizing books. So they're digitizing books, and therefore all those chapters suddenly become individually searchable, and yes, you've guessed it, individually downloadable. So what this means, and you know this, you go to Springer, you go to Elsevier, but to be frank, any publisher, Routledge, the wider business of Taylor and Francis, an independent publisher like Emerald, go to a publisher. And yes, they absolutely publish those edited collections. And they're available in print, so you can buy it as an actual book. They're available as an e-book, but they've now separated out each chapter with an individual identity. So this means now that those book chapters are incredibly easy to find. They exist in print, they exist in ebooks, that's great, so different audiences, that's terrific, and they exist as an individual download. Also, there's the critique in the literature, all that book chapters don't have clear peer review. Again, that may have been accurate 5 or 10 years ago, that's not within my experience. But now, to be honest with you, many edited collections have higher levels of refereeing than articles. And the reason for that is the proposal is assessed, it goes through refereeing, feedback's put in place, and then when the completed book's in place, that also goes through refereeing. So there's actually 2 stages or iterations of refereeing. So the peer review matter has also dissipated. Now your individual chapter will also have a separate DOI. Here we go. So let's get into this. The chapters that I've published in edited collections in the last 5 years have an incredibly different citation story. Big citation rate. We'll talk about the coin, we'll talk about the money at the conclusion of this vlog, but right now your book chapter has a digital existence beyond the edited collection. Fab. Really important. Okay, but let's return to the why of the book chapter rather than a refereed article. Now, firstly, I wouldn't express that as a binary opposition. In the research that I've done for the vlog this week, the research overtly said, oh, look, what do you decide between a book chapter or a refereed article? Team, the decision is not made in that way. It's not an either or, okay? They are different modes of research. They're different ways of doing knowledge, okay? The strength of an edited collection that you don't see in a refereed article, unless it is, of course, a special issue, and they're rare, is that an edited book can capture collective ideas and voices that are nested around an emerging or interesting concept. It has a stand-alone quality and it can build a new field. And books, most importantly, more than articles, move through time. They move through time. Certainly book chapters are valued differently in different disciplines, but it's not an arts versus sciences thing here. In the high humanities, absolutely, book chapters are a thing. In engineering, book chapters are a thing. Different disciplines have different interests, but don't think it's science versus arts. It's not, okay? Now, yes, journal articles are easier to find and cite because they're represented by aggregators like Web of Science, like Scopus. But can I say that the days of those particular aggregators are declining because they don't represent books and book chapters well. So for the bulk of academics, these aggregators aren't very useful to us. I'll just tell you a quick story on this. So if you're dealing with Scopus, you know, I've about to publish my 20th book, right? Now, none of my books are in Scopus. Books. Singly authored scholarly monographs, gold standard. None of those books are in Scopus. But the book reviews of those books in journals are. So those problems aren't going away. And of course, Google Scholar is much more diverse in engaging with books and of course these individual book chapters. So Google Scholar is starting to take over this field, and I would argue quite rightly. So as you can see, a book chapter is different from a journal article because you have a lot more flexibility with the structure. So the way of writing, the way of expressing, the way of organising your ideas is much more diverse, fluid and flexible in book chapters than it is in articles where we have these endless predictable headings, right? So for the social sciences and allied health in particular, in many projects you gain enormously from this freedom and this organisational diversity of ideas. Huge. So my argument is the book chapter does a different type of work to the refereed article. And edited books particularly provide a way into a new area or a new field. They're particularly important because they're bought by libraries, so they're there on the shelves for people interested in a field. It's there to grab. And also for graduate students around the world, these are often the first go-to sources. Right. So edited books, book chapters, can be a guide to a new field. So when they're cleverly configured, and there's some truly amazing edited collections that are around that are being published on a daily basis, it's just an exciting time. And when these edited books are cleverly configured, they bring together really disparate, seemingly jarring ideas into this interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, post-disciplinary mash. And what happens is they make, or indeed they build, a field. Edited books also have a new subgenre that is incredibly important, because the edited books move into handbooks. And to be frank, if you get an opportunity to be in a handbook, you need to say, yeah. You need to say, hell yeah. Tell you why. The advantage of writing a chapter in one of these handbooks, and you know, the Routledge handbook series are the best example of that. Like, their handbook series is tremendous, but other publishers are moving into this field. Now, the advantage of being in a handbook is that you are at the ground up, wow, building a new field, building a new discipline, and you gain, your career, you gain incredible credibility by being there at the start. There's the handbook and there's your chapter. So you're there at the start, the foundation of a new field. And of course, in those handbooks, huge citation rates follow. So let me give you another personal example. I had the privilege, and it was an absolute privilege, I'm still incredibly humbled and amazed, to be frank, 3 years later, to write a chapter, and indeed to write the last chapter, oh my goodness me, to write the last chapter in the Handbook for Physical Cultural Studies. Handbook for Physical Cultural Studies. Huge book. International book. Best new emerging edgy scholars in the world, and building a new field. So physical cultural studies, that handbook was and is and will remain the foundational text for this new and exciting field. And although it was only published, I think, 2 years ago, my chapter is already picking up huge citations, and it did within 6 months. Stunning. So when you're making a decision about whether or not to do a book chapter, don't think about it in terms of book chapter versus refereed article. False binary, team. Think about it in terms of how you would like to structure your ideas, the organisation of knowledge. Think about who your audience is for that research. And the advantage of a book chapter, remember, is it travels through time. So if this is a long-term gig that you want to travel spatially and temporally, the book chapter is the way to do it. And of course, for those handbooks, the audience is huge, and the audience is incredibly long-term. So the final component to think about when you're considering, oh right, why am I doing a book chapter, is also book chapters add diversity to your CV. We've talked about through these vlogs the importance of adding a line to your CV. Well, being able to add sort of a new subheading, book chapters, and adding stuff under that is incredibly important for your CV, because the diversity matters to a CV. So now that we've dealt with the why of it, let's now go, and Chemi, this was your concern, I know, let's move to the how. How to write a book chapter. Now, Chemi particularly expressed some challenges or some issues about how to get into these edited collections, these edited books. Now, Chemi, there's a lot of different ways you can get into these collections. The requests can appear through Twitter, so follow the great scholars in your fields, and if they're looking for chapters, they'll put it through Twitter. So follow Twitter, that's important. Follow the crucial people. Then follow hashtag PhD chat, hashtag ECR chat, crucial. Also, be active. And I'm always amazed that colleagues don't do this more. Be active on Facebook. You've got a lot of friends who are academics. Tell them you are in the market for a book chapter. Say, if anybody knows anything or hears anything in your departments, let me know. Crucial. Now, I rarely use the word networking. For me, networking is like mentoring. Like, really? But often, there is no doubt that book chapters emerge through informal networks. That is true. But Chemi, there are some edited collections that are incredibly competitive. There's no doubt about that. There's an in crowd. I'm not questioning that. But the overwhelming majority of edited books, the editors are desperate for chapters. But you've just got to try and find where the call for chapters exists. And of course, as I always say to you, Chemi, we never know till we try. So remember, be active, be proactive, be conscious. Don't get disappointed or worried. Keep going, keep saying yes. And tell your friends that you're looking for these interesting publishing opportunities, and they will be involved and be your advocate and your agent. So that's the how in terms of access. But there's also a how in terms of how to actually write and construct the chapter, particularly at the proposal stage. Book chapters are different from refereed articles. They are different, they're not the same. And book chapters have a particularly tight argument, a very tight alignment between form and content. But we see a greater diversity of structures than we would see in a refereed article. So as you've picked up, I think, from the vlog already, structure, organisation is everything in a book chapter. The argument has an arc. The argument is well organised. Now, most importantly, Chemi, particularly if you're trying to get into one of these collections, titles are everything. So make sure, go for it. Have a really powerful, snappy, edgy main title and a descriptive and, again, punchy secondary title. The titles sell the book chapters. Important. And, of course, that makes the chapter attractive for an editor. It makes the chapter attractive for an audience, including an audience that finds it through a Google search and can then download it. So strong title, strong argument arc. But most importantly, and this is the tough bit, but it is important, address in your proposal that are often about 100 or 200 words, how your individual project connects to the project of the edited book. This is very hard for PhD students because you're immersed in this singular project. I get that, I'm doing this, and so you try and take a bit of that and put it in the edited book. It doesn't really work. What you have to do, and I'll try and use the right verbs here for you, what you've got to do is, here's your research from your thesis, from your PhD, you've got to bend it. Bend the PhD into the edited collection that suits the arc of the argument in the big book, okay? So you've got to have a sense of the proposal very clearly, and if you're not really sure what they're asking for, email the editor and the editor will give you that clarity. Really importantly in an edited collection, be a team player. Important, everyone going individual, look at me, it's my chapter, me. Actually, an edited book is different. You are on a team. And I sort of love that too. So be generous. Show how your contribution enhances the entirety of the book's project. It's not your thesis, it's an edited book. So make sure your references and your bibliography are current. So what you've got to do, because of that longevity in a book chapter, you've got to show the historic references, that you know your field, show the big names, you've got to do that. But in the very year that you're writing, in fact the month before you're about to submit it, make sure the most current references are there, because it's going to travel in the long term. You need, so 2020 is a great example. That's when I'm recording this vlog. So when I'm doing edited collections this year, the final thing I do is I add 10 references from 2020. So that means when the chapter is read in 2022 or 2025, it's not dated. Okay, so make sure it's absolutely current and of its time. So Chemi, as you can see, that's the proposal arc that you need. Now, don't be discouraged if you've got a few knockbacks. Sometimes, absolutely, you're right, there is an in crowd for edited books, but that's increasingly rare. So what do we need to do is find those calls for chapters, not calls for articles, calls for papers, calls for chapters. This is a very specific search team. So there are a range of online services that aggregate the call for chapters. So always remember to look for CFC. CFC, that's the key to put into the search engines. So sciencepg.com has a call for chapters, use it. ResearchGate lists calls for chapters, use it. But there's also a nifty site that I actually found this week when I was prepping this for you, and it's changed my life. It's changed my life. And it's EATEL, EATEL. EATEL, and the full site is https ea-tel.eu/category/call for chapters. That will blow your mind. Okay, so we've done the how, we've done the why. Let's finish off with the what. What to actually write in a book chapter. Now remember, the most important advice is you are writing a book chapter that fits into the project of the editor. It's not your project. So the argument that you make in the chapter is crucial, is important. It needs to be brilliant. But it has to be tethered to the overarching themes and tropes in the book. So you have to be a team player. You have to contribute and work within the frame of that book. This is often called a global argument. Important phrase, global argument. So have a sense of the contents page, know the work of the other contributors if you can, cite them if you can. Trick for punters. Therefore, ask the editors for the book proposal they're going to be presenting, and then you can see where your chapter fits and try to avoid, if you can, overlaps. The hardest thing as an editor, and I've edited a lot of books, is the overlap, and that's the hard yakka. So you've got to try and make sure that the project is cut up sufficiently so everybody's moving forward with innovation. And this is particularly important if you come to the project late. Let me tell you what happens. Very frequently, and I mean very frequently, team, an editor puts out a proposal that's accepted by a publisher. Everyone goes away and they write their chapters, but not everyone goes away and writes their chapters. So the deadline hits and people haven't written their chapters. It could be one person, it could be half the collection. So often what you see in these call for chapters is desperation. Authors have not delivered, so an editor or editors are scratching about for a few more chapters. Yeah. So you know what you need to do? You need to jump at those chances. Say yes, say yes. But if you are a late starter, do ask to see the proposal, and because you are a late starter, ask to see a couple of the chapters so you can really and quickly nest into the overarching argument. And there's nothing more beautiful, can I say, when you're reading an edited book and authors have the generosity of referring to each other and each other's chapters. It looks amazing. And also, to save yourself time, particularly if you are coming in late, ask for details about referencing style. Pathway to madness, if you've got to keep changing the referencing style. Ask for any specific stylistic issues, particularly around, say, the use of titles or subtitles. Punctuation. Every edited collection has different punctuation, and of course American versus British spellings. Asking all of that early saves you time. You can use those while you're writing rather than at the end. And also aim for that clear, crystalline argument. A great edited collection is diverse, that's the point. A whole series of powerful arguments that come together and summon that global argument. It's like an orchestra. It's like an orchestra. And remember the focus when you're writing that book chapter. Focus very strongly. You need a brilliant introduction and conclusion. This is like a piece of music. You need a really wow, big introduction. Not sort of, oh, in this chapter I will. Nah, story, powerful, bang. Bring them in. make them get that download. Come on, poof. Conclusion, make people feel exhausted, emotional, excited, moving forward. So make the intro and the conclusion really good in a book chapter. You can be diverse, you can be creative, whatever your discipline, go for it. Also clear sections and very strong organisation. This is really where we talk about the story of the research. A book chapter must have that story arc. It should make for interesting reading, and by that I mean results are not enough. As we all know, there are plenty of refereed articles that are published where I've got results, here's an article, results article, result article. Book chapter is a bit more honest than that. Results aren't enough. The story, the arc of the research is needed. So at its best, if this helps, an edited book collection is like a greatest hits album, right? It travels through time efficiently. It also provides a great advertisement for you, because what happens is people read that book chapter and go, gee, that's an interesting person. That's an interesting argument, like a greatest hits, and then they go and buy the album. Similarly, they go and have a look, oh, that's an interesting scholar. Let's put his or her name into Google Scholar and see what happens. So great advertisement for you in the long term. And of course the edited book can become the go-to publication. When we need to enter a new field, all of us go, oh, that's something I don't really know enough about. What's available? And go, oh, edited book. Let's slam in some new ideas and see where it takes us. So that's why it's useful. It allows us as scholars to refresh and make those really significant interdisciplinary connections. So book chapters have weight. They have weight, and they can add diversity to your CV. Finally, I wanted to talk about money. I want to talk about coin. Now, you are very rarely paid for a book chapter, and of course you're really never paid for a refereed article. Indeed, I know many of you are in this sort of cycle of paying for open access. Can I say just about 99% of my stuff is open access. I've never paid $1, so that's a whole other thing. But with a book chapter, you often gain a free copy of the book, which is great, because just to give you an example from those handbooks, they're often $150, pounds, euros, so it's a big chunky book, so that's nice, that's great. But there is also a small but significant income stream, particularly with book chapters. So if you join the Society of Authors, but also the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society, www.alcs.co.uk, then with those two organisations, a funding stream is possible. Now, this is not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money. But over a career, a book chapter can provide an income stream that you will never see with a refereed article. Now, I'm a member of both the Society of Authors and the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society. I'm a proud member of both. I believe in them as organisations because they're strong representative bodies for authors. And the great thing about them is it's all authors. So academic authors, which is great, we're part of the story. And that's wonderful. We're never neglected. We are part of the story. And they recognise and they pay the authors. So when a book chapter is used for teaching or other scholarly purposes, they have to pay for it. So I've made an argument for you in the vlog this week. Some of the vlogs do make a case, make an argument, and you can go, yeah, no. Yeah, no. Or you can go, that's a thing for me to consider. Because there are lots of choices in research dissemination. And look, that diversity is incredibly exciting. But it can also be overwhelming, I know. But look, Chemi, the book chapter is available for your consideration. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.